Promosi Doktor untuk Saudara Jimmy Saputra akan segera dimulai. Dekan Fakultas Pendidikan dan Bahasa, promotor, ko-promotor, dan para penguji akan memasuki ruangan. Hadirin dimohon untuk berdiri. Sebelum acara dimulai, saya akan memimpin doa. Doa akan dimulai dalam nama Bapa dan Putra dan Roh Kudus. Amin. Ya Allah, Bapa yang Maha Pengasih, Engkau Maha Bijaksana dan Maha Tahu. Maka kami mempercayakan diri kami dan peristiwa penting promosi doktor hari ini kepada kebijaksanaan-Mu. Kami bersyukur kepadamu karena hari ini saudara kami, Bapak Jimmy Saputra, boleh menjalani seluruh kegiatan studi, kerja, dan usaha selama ini, hingga akhir sampai pada momen promosi doktor pada hari ini. Kami semua sangat berbahagia bisa hadir dalam peristiwa yang penting ini. Semoga peristiwa ini menghantar saudara kami ke tahap baru dalam hidupnya sebagai orang yang beriman dalam pengabdiannya kepadamu dan dalam pelayanannya kepada gereja dan tanah air. Semoga Bapak Jimmy Saputra yang telah mempersiapkan diri secara lahir dan batin selama studi, hari ini dapat mempertahankan disertasinya dengan baik, sehingga dapat menerima promosi doktornya. Terima kasih atas kerja keras dan dukungan dari Profesor Doktor Setiono Sugiharto dan Doktor Luciana M.Ed untuk Bapak Jimmy Saputra sampai dengan pada hari ini. Berkatilah seluruh panitia dan penyelenggara acara, serta kami semua agar dapat melaksanakan dan mengikuti peristiwa penting dan baik ini. Semoga kami semua mengusahakan kerjasama yang baik dan ambil bagian aktif demi keberhasilan acara ini. Semoga kebersamaan dalam melaksanakan peristiwa penting ini semakin meningkatkan persekutuan kasih di antara kami. Ya Bapa yang Maha Bijaksana, Engkaulah satu-satunya tumpuan harapan kami. Kami serahkan seluruh rangkaian acara ini ke dalam tangan-Mu, demi Kristus, Putra-Mu dan Roh Kudus, kini dan sepanjang segala masa. Amin. Dalam nama Bapa dan Putra dan Roh Kudus. Amin. Hadirin yang kami muliakan, sidang ujian terbuka promosi doktor untuk Saudara Jimmy Saputra akan segera dibuka oleh Ketua Sidang, Dekan Fakultas Pendidikan dan Bahasa. Kepada Dr. Luciana M.Ed, kami persilahkan. Hadirin dipersilahkan untuk duduk kembali.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hereby officially open the public academic session for the promotion of the doctoral candidate in applied English linguistics, Mr. Jimmy Saputra. The examining board is composed of the dissertation advisor, Professor Dr. Setiono Sugiharto, from Atmaja Catholic University of Indonesia, and the co-advisor, Dr. Luciana M.Ed. from Atmaja Catholic University of Indonesia, and 3 other examiners, Ibu Sisilia Halimi, Ph.D. from the University of Indonesia, Professor Dr. Bambang Kaswanti Purwo from Atmaja Catholic University of Indonesia, and Ibu Yanti, Ph.D. from Atmaja Catholic University of Indonesia. Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra. As the Dean, Faculty of Education and Languages, I would like to ask you whether you are mentally and physically prepared to defend your dissertation. Thank you. Now I'm going to read Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra's brief biodata. Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra earned her master's degree in educational technology from the University Pelita Harapan. He has got some professional qualification like 21 years teaching English teaching experience at national and international schools, also 22 years teaching experience at universities. He also has some work from the publication and also seminar, like listening, structure and reading comprehension, test of English as a foreign language. That's the thesis published in 2014. The effect of positive discipline method on students, self-regulatory skills and entrepreneurial skills in the students in the first grade class of Quantum Change Academy, that 2015. And the latest one, he also conducted analysis of informatics as new subjects with new approach in elementary and secondary education in 2020. And in 2023, he wrote Empowering West Jakarta Orphanage Youth, the Impact of Hydroponic Cultivation Training on Entrepreneurial Intentions. That's the 5th International Conference on Science, Education, and Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, the exam will now start and will last for an hour. I would like to begin by asking Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra to present a summary of his findings entitled An Analysis of Cultural Representations and Transcultural Flows in Indonesian EFL Textbooks. Time is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Dr. Luciana, M.Ed, Professor Dr. Setiono Sugiharto, Professor Bambang Kaswanti Purwo, Ibu Dr. Yanti, and Ibu Dr. Sisilia Halimi. Thank you for all the guests who came today. And now I would like to present my dissertation. The title of my dissertation is An Analysis of Cultural Representations and Transcultural Flows in Indonesian EFL Textbooks. This is the outline of my presentation. Why I like to do this in my study? Because I have two things that make me interested. First one is the interplay of language, culture, and identity, which has undergone significant changes driven by global Englishes. And second is global Englishes, characterized by varieties of English, has transformed English across linguistic and cultural boundaries, resulting in transcultural flows by Pennycook 2007. And when we talk about study of analysis for textbooks, there are three portrayals of culture that we have found in the literature. The first one is what we call as large culture, which sees culture as an entity. This is found by Cortazzi and Jean, 1999. And then they divided culture into three parts: local, target, and international culture. The second one is small culture, which sees culture as a coherent behavior by Holliday in 1999. And according to Holliday, culture or small culture avoids culture seen as ethnicity, nationality, or international generalizations. While the latest one that I'm using in my study is transcultural flows, which sees culture as a process by Pennycook. According to Pennycook, culture forms move, change, and are reused to fashion new identities in diverse contexts. There were some previous studies being done in the analysis of EFL textbooks. If you can see from the table that I put it there, there were 5 previous studies 4 analyzing about EFL textbooks with different methodologies, most of them using the quantitative approach, and the other one was about transcultural flows. And if you see that the findings were mostly about quantitative analysis using the percentage of each textbook. Given the fact that the previous studies that I showed just now, I have 3 research gaps here. First is all the studies, they were focusing on their research on quantitative occurrences of cultural categories. The second one was the concept of large culture was mainly adopted by these studies. And last but not least, the transcultural flows was not really depicted in those studies. Only one study being carried out, and this researcher, they put transcultural flows outside of the classroom, so not on the textbooks. Now that brings me to the objective of the study. First is to examine how culture, in light of its dynamic aspect in changing global world, was manifested in various content materials of the 3 textbooks, and to find out how these cultural representations reflect transcultural flows. I have 2 research questions. First one is, how is culture represented in 3 Indonesian EFL textbooks? And the second one is, how do these cultural representations reflect transcultural flows? As the backbone of my study, I have some literature reviews, starting from global Englishes, and then large culture, small culture, and also transcultural flows. This is the theoretical framework that I'm using in my study. First, I use Byram and Morgan's theory of cultural categories. There are 9 cultural categories. And then also, the second one will be used for the second theoretical framework. This is the description of the 9 cultural categories by Byram and Morgan, 1994. There are 9 categories, with each description of each category. This is the second theoretical framework. After I finish analyzing the textbooks using Byram and Morgan's cultural categories, then I move on to try to take the concept of transcultural flows from Pennycook. And Pennycook has 4 keywords in his explanation that transcultural flows deal with borrowing, blending, remaking, and returning. So I try to summarize what he thought about transcultural flows. First, transcultural flows happened because of the global Englishes. And according to him, cultural forms, which means moved, changed, and reused. And also, cultural forms had the fashion of new identities in diverse contexts. And finally, transcultural flows can be understood by these 4 concepts by Pennycook. Now let me explain what it means by borrowing. Borrowing means that the culture that we have is not originally from Indonesia. As you can see, the picture of the woman wearing the headscarf. So headscarf is not originally from Indonesia. We borrowed it. So that is the meaning of borrowing from Pennycook. In short, borrowing means that we don't have the culture. Instead, the culture is being borrowed from other places or other countries. The second one, blending. I think probably people here like to go to McDonald's. So if you go there, you can have American burger. But this menu is quite unique because there is a blending process in the food. So burger mixed with the rendang from Padang. So this is blending culture, according to Pennycook. And the third one is remaking. You see the picture of Rich Brian. He represented the so-called hip-hop music in Indonesia, which was not originally from Indonesia. Hip-hop was originally from the US. Somehow this young man, he adopted hip-hop music and remade it into somehow Indonesian hip-hop. And the last one is returning. Rap music, the origin of rap music is from US and then traveled all around to the Africa and went back to US, so that means it has returned to the original place. Now the methodology, like I said, this is a qualitative content analysis because the research gap showed that most of the previous studies did not use qualitative analysis. So I'm trying to do this in my study by using qualitative content analysis. And that the data source were taken from the 3 EFL textbooks published by Ministry of Education and Culture, all the way from grade 10 to grade 12. The data collection procedure, there are 2 steps here, textbook selection and textbook content selection. And after that, the data analysis will use the 9 cultural categories by Byram and Morgan, and also the concept of transcultural flows by Pennycook. Now, how did I select the books? First, I selected these 3 books because they were published by the government. So mainly they were used by public schools, mostly in Indonesia. And then the books covered the 3 grade levels, which can enrich the findings in my study. This is the step. So with the considerations. And for the second step, the data collection procedure, you see that I used the 5 culture information types from Adasco et al., 1990, and he had 8 culture information types. However, I used only 5 types, which are descriptive text, cultural note, dialogue, idioms and collocation, and visual illustration. The reasons are, first, writing task was excluded because it's heavily focused on the task itself, putting aside the cultural aspects. Second is audio type. The textbooks were not accompanied by the audio materials, so it was excluded. And the realia, because it was highly overlapping with the visual illustrations. This is the 8 types of cultural information from Adasco et al. Now, how did I analyze these 3 textbooks? First, I used the Byram and Morgan's 9 cultural categories to answer the research question 1. So the analysis was carried out from all chapters of the 3 textbooks using percentages. So I used this percentage to see the proportion of the textbooks and to help me with the qualitative analysis later in my study. The second one, I also analyzed the possibilities of the categories which may not cover the category. And qualitatively, I also analyzed the textbooks using the selected data. So this is the sample of the selected data taken from the books with all the 9 categories. This is based on the descriptive text. After that, finishing the first research question, I moved on to the next research question. After I found the cultural categories from the 9 cultural categories, then I moved on to see whether those textbooks depicted the concept of transcultural flows from Pennycook, which are borrowing, blending, remaking, and returning. Now this is the key findings of research question 1. The 9 cultural categories were not able somehow to cover all the cultural representations in the textbooks. And then the categories did not accommodate the subtlety of the content of the cultural representations. I will show you the examples after this. And there were 3 categories which were dominant, which are social interaction, belief and behavior, socio-political institutions, and other 3 categories which were least dominant, which were national geography, national cultural heritage and stereotypes, and national identity. And the last one, my finding was the cultural representations of the 3 textbooks were mostly depicted in the forms of words, terms, phrases, fixed expressions, and pictures. And this is the table showing you the percentage of each cultural category. As you can see that number 2, 3, and 4 were the most dominant of the 9 categories, while number 7, 8, and 9 were the least dominant. How about the discussion of research question 1? So I found out that these categories by Byram and Morgan somehow it has like an inability to encompass all the cultural representations that can be found in the textbooks. And then the categories still did not accommodate the subtlety of the content of the cultural representations. What it means that some of the categories cannot capture all the cultural content in the textbooks. And the overall analysis showed that 3 categories were outstanding, while the other 3 were least dominant. And the cultural representations were mostly depicted in the forms of words, like I said, terms, phrases, fixed expressions, and pictures. How about the second key findings of research question 2? The concept of borrowing was predominantly seen in the 3 textbooks under the category of belief and behavior. And the concept of borrowing was captured in the form of food, clothing, music, lifestyle, as well as in the belief or religious symbols. The cultural representations considering the concept of borrowing were mostly depicted in the form of quotes. The quotes were found in the textbooks as the motivational words spoken by people from different places. I mean, not from Indonesia, that's why I put them as the transcultural flows for my findings. This is the percentage of the transcultural flows. As you can see, the third category of belief and behavior with the concept of borrowing, it was found in grade 11 only of the textbooks, and then grade 12 has only 3, and all the way to all other categories. So it made up like 47% of the whole textbooks. How about the discussions for the research question 2? Like I said, the predominant concept of borrowing was clearly seen, and then there was another finding here: blending and returning were not captured in the textbooks. And most probably this was because that the textbooks were published by the government, so it mainly focusing on the local culture instead of the target culture or international culture. And then the cultural representations with the concept of borrowing were seen in various aspects, mostly about lifestyles. And the cultural representations considering the concept of borrowing were mostly depicted in the form of quotes from other countries. This is a sample of the findings from the first category, which is social identity and social groups, found from the descriptive text Meeting My Idol, and they were talking about Afghan. The term Afghanism, this is one term taken from the text, it developed somehow a notion of belonging to specific social identities and social groups. So based on Byram and Morgan, social identity and social groups was not only talking about the identity of, for example, being Indonesian or being Malaysian or being Singaporean. Instead, social identity and social groups were talking more about the specific social identities and social groupings. In this case, the term Afghanism refers to the groups of people. They share the same hobbies, they like music, and they have the similar idol, which is Afghan in this case. So that made a social grouping and social identity of their own. Not only that, it also shows the social status of these people. They came from different backgrounds. Somehow they have the similar or the same hobbies, which is music or Indonesian pop music. Also, this category represents a collective identity reflected in the text. They share joy, they shout, and also they sing together. The second one is the category of social interaction. It was depicted in the dialogue between Alif and his colleagues. They were congratulating Alif because he was promoted to be the director of the company, and these expressions, "Oh, that's wonderful, Alif, good for you, good luck," and so on, representing a typical social tradition of congratulating and praising someone's success. According to Byram, again, he said that social interaction was depicted in fixed expressions and verbal or non-verbal communication used in the dialogue, in the text, and even in the pictures. And also, the discourse highlights cultural norms ingrained in professional social relationship. Because of the time constraint, I will move on to the next research question, which is the transcultural flows. So what I found from the textbooks was this one, the picture of, again, the lady with the headscarf. So I took this as the finding for the transcultural flows, and then this category is in belief and behavior. Like I said, the headscarf was borrowed from the Middle East. Somehow it was remade by Indonesian women especially, and now it becomes the Indonesian representation or symbol of religion, which is Muslim. So also not only religious symbol, but also the fashion style. And this is interesting because there are two aspects of transcultural flows here, which are borrowing and remaking. The conclusion: although the cultural categories offer a methodical framework for grasping and categorizing cultural characteristics, the research has also shown several fundamental shortcomings. I told you already that not all the categories were able to capture all the data from the textbooks. On the other hand, the fluidity of culture, which is demonstrated by the simultaneous classification of material under many categories, demonstrates that there is a requirement for a categorization system that is more flexible and also more adaptable. And also, the outcomes of the study provide support for the framework to undergo continuous change. In other words, because culture changes, so the categorization needs to be evaluated, and also it changes in relation to the time or the changes in the world. Recommendation: it is necessary to redefine and reevaluate the concept of culture, particularly in the content of EFL textbooks. Like I said, that there were lots of scholars doing this textbook analysis from different perspectives. Mainly, the two big perceptions about textbook analysis, which were the large culture and the small culture. And in my recommendation, the textbook analysis should focus more on the small culture rather than the large culture because of the complexity and the fluidity of the culture, which brought a new paradigm shift in the EFL learning. And it is important to understand and implement the transcultural concept in the EFL learning. This is not only for the EFL learners, but also for teachers. In my study, there were some limitations. First, the findings have indicated that cultural representations and transcultural flows are present. However, the study were not further related on how the students and the teachers discerned on the pedagogical implications. So that is not part of my study. Somehow it is needed by further study. So the further study will be investigating the pedagogical implications as well as exploring more in the sphere of global Englishes, in this case, transcultural flows. Thank you. I will get back to Ibu Dr. Luciana.
Thank you, Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra. Ladies and gentlemen, each of the 5 examiners will ask questions. I have the honor to invite Ibu Sisilia Halimi, Ph.D., as our external examiner to pose the first question. Time is yours, Ibu.
Thank you, Ibu Lucy. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Pak Jimmy for reaching the final stage of your doctoral study. And I have 2 questions for you. So the first one is about the Brime and Morgan's framework. Yeah, you mentioned that this framework is less flexible and adaptable because it was not able to classify all your data. But it is not surprising because the framework was, I think, introduced a long time ago, yeah? So my question is, when you mention that a more dynamic framework would be better able to capture the complexity that is inherent in cultural representation, what do you mean by a dynamic, flexible, and adaptable framework?
Okay. Can I answer now? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sisilia. Yeah, I just said that the categories were not really flexible and adaptable because in my finding, actually, there was one chapter from the book which was not embraced by these categories. The topic is about technology. So I think probably like you said that, yeah, because of the time changes and also the dynamic nature of culture. So the text about technology was not captured. And I went through all the 9 categories and tried to find out whether this category belongs to any of them. but I couldn't find. So, like I said in my findings, it would be probably for the next study, people probably can propose or probably add something to the category, or the category itself should be redefined, because each category has its own description and definition, and those definitions were not that quite flexible in my findings. So that is what I mean by the flexibility, and then also the ability for the categories to capture probably more nuance of culture, like what we are having now. We live in the technology era with all the globalization and things.
Okay, well, thank you, Pak Jimmy. And then my second question is actually, well, this is related to what you wrote in your dissertation, yeah, which I think is not correct. Yeah, because you mentioned here that in your dissertation that the concept, and this is related to the transcultural flow of panicooks, yeah? So the concept of blending, remaking, and returning were not captured in the textbooks. But on the next pages, page 209 and 210, you gave examples of how borrowing and remaking were found, yeah, in the textbook. So here there is two statements which are contradictory. What is your comment on this?
Yeah, I really acknowledge that, ma'am. So I accidentally put that remaking on the list. Actually, the remaking was found with the one data that I showed just now about the lady with the headscarf. So borrowing and remaking with the picture. So I consider this as one.
Because you mentioned two examples actually in your dissertation.
Actually, I found one data, but with two concepts, ma'am, borrowing and remaking at the same time.
Yeah, but you also mentioned about cultural representation of food, dress. This is also create a rich tapestry of examples of borrowing and remaking in your dissertation.
I think I should correct that, ma'am. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if it is okay, I want to ask one more question.
Okay.
You also mentioned it is necessary to define and evaluate the concept of culture, particularly in the content of EFL context. Based on the findings of your study, what should be redefined and re-evaluated about the concept of culture in EFL textbooks that you have analyzed?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sisilia. Actually, what I was trying to say is that not only the categorization, because that is only a tool, but I think more important thing is that culture itself should be explored more, especially to the EFL learners, not only by the teachers, but also probably the textbook writers itself, the policy makers. In this case, probably they have to give a more comprehensive picture of culture. Like I said, there are two big approaches here in this case, the large culture and the small culture. And which approach that can be in line with what happened in the real life today. I like what we know, that globalization and the fluidity of the culture, like Panikuk said. In my opinion, based on my findings, the textbooks have to start to move on from only looking at culture as local, target, and international. Not that simple, because if you go to Singapore, for example, we can find people speaking English, that is Singaporean English, and Malaysia and other countries. So what I'm saying is, it's time for all the people pertinent in this area to portray culture in a more adaptive and then more flexible to the world that's happening today with the globalization, especially because of the global Englishes. In that case, I would say that the culture will be understood correctly, or let's say understood in a more, a more comprehensive way by the FL learners, instead of only showing cultures, like I said, the large culture, local, target, and international, which is fine, but I don't think this is enough to capture the culture just like that. That's my answer.
Well, thank you, Pak Jimmy.
Thank you.
And that's also Ibu Lucy from me.
Thank you, Ibu Sisil. Would Professor Dr. Bambang Kaswanti Purwo, the second examiner, now pose your questions?
Jimmy,
Yes, Prof.
your work is analysis of two things, cultural representation
Yes.
using the framework of Byram and Morgan, and examine the transcultural flows using the Penny Cox as your framework,
Yes.
right? Now my question is, what makes your work different from the previous works? Make it short. Make it in 1 or 2 sentences.
Okay. Thank you, bro. Probably I mentioned already in the previous studies and research gap. The first one, I used Byram and Morgan actually just to depict the cultures, like I tried to look at the whole things in the books using this framework of Byram, just it is, to capture the cultural representations.
Yeah.
But I will not stop there because my intention was actually to find out whether these textbooks are representing transcultural concepts, which is like I said, this is happening because of the globalization and things. So using Pennycock's theory, I finally, in my conclusion, I found that this concept was not clearly seen in the textbooks, and that means that the books or the textbooks have to, like I said, to be modified or adjusted with the needs of the global world today, Prof.
I want to make it short because
Yeah.
you want to say in the previous studies,
Yeah.
your findings mainly focused on using Byram and Morgan's work, right?
Yes.
Mainly. What do you mean mainly here? There are others also not using Byram?
Yes, Prof. I read some literatures, and then mostly they used Byram and Morgan's category of culture. Of course, there were some others like Kortazi and Jin. They used the 3 categorizations like local, target, and international culture. Also, Byram himself, he also...
mainly mean there's something else. Like the others
Right,
were not using
right.
it.
Yes, Prof.
So what is the others? What are the others doing?
Yeah, they also use the categorization, but different approaches, Prof. Not based on small culture,
I'm
but the
focusing on
large
where
culture.
you wrote.
Yes.
Mainly focus on the culture category by Byram and Morgan. Yeah, mainly so of the 5 previous work, mainly 4 of them, right?
Yes, Prof.
And one of them,
Was from Kortazi and Jin.
Pennycock, right?
No, it's not
Yeah.
Pennycock. Kortazi
One
and
of
Jin,
them,
Prof.
now you say here, Dovjin. What about Dovjin?
Oh, that was the transcultural, yes, Prof.
So Dovjin,
Yes.
there are 4 previous studies.
Yeah,
5,
okay.
right?
Yes,
4, Byram and Morgan.
Yeah,
and
and
one.
one, yes.
Yeah, I think at least you should make it stand out.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah, bro.
So mostly on Byram and Morgan.
Right, yes.
Only one.
Yeah. Only
Dovjin.
one, yes.
Pennycock. Good.
Yes, bro.
Now, if you look at this Dovjin here, so you see that many only few work on Pennycock, right?
Right.
So if you could show how you supersede Dovjin, that will make your work outstanding, right? But I didn't see that in your work. So you're not comparing how to compare Dovjin's work on Pennycock's analysis and what have you done with Pennycock. That will be
Prof.
something that there's new from
Yeah,
your
Prof.
study. Because I'm searching what is new
Yeah.
from your study
Yeah.
that you have not been able to make it clear in your writing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Now, the second question is on chapter 5. Why, in the first paragraph of chapter 5 of the previous draft in the closed exam, you wrote, you examine your critical examination of the 2 theoretical frameworks. But in your draft now, that is gone. Why did you erase?
Oh.
Why did you delete the point on critical examination of the 2 frameworks
Yeah.
that is there in the earlier draft, but no longer here.
Yeah, Prof.
Do you have reason for deleting it?
No, that was my mistake, Prof. Actually, I probably accidentally deleted. Actually, I was asked to revise chapter 5 before I submitted to you. So actually, it should be there.
Should be there.
Yes, Prof.
But it's not there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah.
Now, if I look at your chapter, in one of your statement here, summing up of your study on the question 1, you said here that the analysis here is in perfect harmony, with the model developed by Baron Morgan. This is not critical, right? This is supporting in harmony. And then you also say here on question number 2 that they are in line with Penny Cook's. So from these two statements of yours, it's not critical examination. So could you show us where's your analysis that reflect your critical examination of the two frameworks?
Thank you, Prof. Actually, I delivered both the pluses and the minuses of the categorization. Some, like I said, some can cover the cultural content in the 3 textbooks, but some other categories which not really clearly seen. That's why my findings said, and my discussion also stated that it needs to be more flexible, because somehow the categorization itself was quite rigid, looking at culture like a static rather than dynamic. So I put that critics about the category from Byram. If you can see in my findings, Prof, there was some points about the lack from the categorization.
Yeah, you also say here that the study provides support. So I see 3 instances where you wrote that you are supporting the framework.
On the other hand, there were some, yes,
rather
Prof.
than criticizing.
Right.
If you do so, you are just the pembantu of the previous researchers.
Yeah.
You are not the master, not even the doctor in linguistics. We have to be able to criticize,
Yeah.
not just using it and supporting what that your work support them, but that there are some element that you can say, your data critically examine the framework. In the previous draft, in the close exam, I do not see any evidence of critical examination. But in here, in your present draft, I see some hints, some point, but you have not wrapped them up into the critical examination. Could you find them? I could see that you wrote somewhere in chapter 4.
Yes, Prof.
You have not wrapped them up into as evidence for your critical examination.
Actually, I put them in my findings for the first research question is on chapter 4.1. So there were 4 findings there, Prof. So firstly, the non-cultural categories were not able to cover all the cultural representations in the textbooks. And secondly, the analysis of the textbooks. Right.
We're not able. The non-categories were not able to cover all.
Yes.
This one evidence, yeah?
Yes, Prof.
Critical. The next one?
The next one, secondly, the analysis of the textbooks using Byram and Morgan's theory further revealed that the categories did not accommodate the subtlety of the content of the cultural representations.
Did not accommodate.
Right,
Okay, so these are evidence of your critical examination.
right.
So wrap them up.
Okay,
I don't see it in the conclusion.
okay.
In the conclusion, you only say you are supporting all the theoretical framework.
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. So I think
Yes,
this
Prof.
will make your book outstanding.
Okay.
And you can show how, to what extent you can criticize the framework. The second one is the next one is you talk about in the conclusion, you only talk about the first research question. It's only about Byram and Morgan's work analysis. Nothing on Pennycox at all. So your work is on these two analyses, right? Byram and Morgan and also
Yes.
Pennycox. When your conclusion is only mainly on the first research question.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah.
I missed that. I will fix it, Prof.
And what I don't understand is, in the conclusion, you also said, you said that you relate that to the first paragraph in the conclusion. So the last sentence in the conclusion, in the first paragraph, in the opening paragraph of conclusion, you said that the study recognizes the complex and changing characteristic of cultural identities. Now, this is what I'm asking you, specifically in relation to English language education. You never talk about this in your whole book.
Yeah.
In relation to English language education.
Actually, what I meant by that was the EFL learning, Prof. The term, I should have changed the term.
Yeah.
That I refer to the FL learning. I previously mentioned that in my draft.
Okay, I only see the sentence, but not in
Yes.
anywhere in the other.
Yes, Prof.
The elaboration of this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Professor Bambang Kaswanti Purwo. I now invite the third examiner, Ibu Yanti, Ph.D, to ask questions. Time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana. Congratulations, Pak Jimmy.
Yes, Prof.
I have some comments and questions. The first is about the data. In your presentation and as well as in your draft, you said that, let me confirm first and then I'll follow up with my questions. So there are 8 categories of data, but you chose 5 of them. Am I correct?
Yes.
And all the 5 types, you also make further selection
Yes.
for analysis.
For the qualitative, yes.
Yeah, so can you explain to us your arguments about these 2 steps of data selection?
Okay.
So please explain that, because my question is, I ask these questions because this is a textbook analysis, right? And I believe that to have a whole picture of the whole textbooks, you would want to see the whole data, because it's content analysis. So maybe you can explain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yanti. Actually, I did both quantitative and qualitative analysis, but the quantitative approach was just to see, anyway, this is not really like the whole statistics, but only descriptive, to see the big picture of the books, because from that I'm going to see it in more detail qualitatively, of course. That's why in the qualitative step, I only selected some data. As my understanding that in qualitative, we don't have to see all as the data, but from the quantitative aspect, I can sense that these textbooks have certain categorization. If you see in my table that the most 3 dominant and the least 3 dominant from all the 9 categories were captured in the percentage, and in my findings, in my qualitative analysis, it also shows that these categorizations agree, in line with the quantitative analysis, with all the various types of data in the text, the descriptive, the pictures, the dialogue, and so on. So the reason why I use both approaches just to see the whole picture of the study. So that's my answer.
No, let me ask. So the in your table 4.1, you have some statistics, right, about
Right.
the data.
Yes.
So my questions, because I haven't seen anything about like how many texts of each type in your dissertation. So based on this, it's already your analysis, right? So my question would be like, from the 5 types, right? And you said you select some text for qualitative analysis.
Right.
Now, can you tell me the portion for of the text that you selected for quantitative as well, like a general picture, and then how much of that you use for data analysis, for qualitative analysis? So that is not so clear, so maybe you can explain to me.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, for the quantitative step, actually I took all chapters of the 3 textbooks, all the way from grade 10 to 12. So every chapter I tried to collect the data and to see which one belongs to which category. That is shown in table 4.1. So that makes the first analysis that I will use for the next
Sorry,
qualitative.
maybe I didn't make it clear. It's
Uh-huh.
not these cultural categories, but it's more of the text types.
Oh, okay.
First,
Okay.
yeah,
The
yeah.
5 types.
Right.
Okay. For the 5 types, because actually I have to probably mention 5 types are descriptive text, culture note, dialogues for habitual action, idioms and collocation, and visual illustration.
Right, so all
Right.
these 5,
Right.
did you take all texts of these types for your analysis or not? So that's actually my question.
Yes. For the quantitative, yes, ma'am.
Quantitative.
Yes.
Where do you show that in your dissertation? So
In
maybe
my-
you would want to add that.
In my draft, I just collected all the data, but then in my findings,
So how many texts of each? Do you have a section on that? So, or I missed that.
not in details, ma'am, for that.
Yeah, so I didn't see that. So I was wondering what's the proportion that you use
Oh,
for
Okay,
for-
from the 5 types.
Right, for
Okay.
qualitative analysis.
Okay.
So I think if you provide that, that would give us a better picture that, especially this is a content analysis.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think it must be well represented, yeah, the
Yeah.
amount of data that you use for analysis.
Yeah, ma'am.
So that's one.
Okay.
And then the second question is, yeah, I think it has been a question from us during the previous stages, but you found it finally in your research about, what are the new things, right? Which is good, but you said that earlier, answering Ibu Sisilia's question, that there are only 1 or 2 data about these subtle categories.
Yeah.
So my question is, since this is a dissertation and you have dealt with this data for quite a while, what would be your suggestion, for elaboration of these cultural categories proposed by Ibrahim and Morgan? I think if you make that, clearly, it would be good.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Actually, the next step or the suggestion I will propose to the next study or anyone who are interested in this area would be like I said, the redefinition of culture first, and then try to portray culture more comprehensively in textbooks by probably I have some ideas like to put like certain section of the textbooks which is talking about cultural note, like cultural section only. So it explains how these books talk about culture specifically. So not only, for example, reading text. Usually we found that reading text, reading comprehension with all the questions, that's all. But then probably it would be a good idea for the textbook writers to put on that section under the text that there have some cultural aspects in the text, which are blah, blah, blah. Or even by adding some glossaries regarding the terms related to culture. That's the first. The second would be, my suggestion would be like trying to capture the culture in a more like Pani Cook said, the fluidity of culture. So this is also, I think, the problem of today's young generations. They don't really care, perhaps, or they don't really know that culture is actually not that simple. One culture may not claim that this is Indonesian only, but perhaps it is Chinese also involved in it, and so on and so forth. So that will be my suggestions about the findings, based on the findings in my study.
Okay. So, and then my last point is actually a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
In your draft, especially in chapter 4, you present the key findings at the beginning
Right.
for each research question.
Mhm.
I think you would want to consider reorganize that part, because you haven't shown us any findings, any data, and it's hard to follow if you come up with the key findings
Okay.
first. And also the suggestion for chapter 5, so I think the summary of key findings
Right.
should be put in chapter 5, as I'm already mentioned in previous stage.
Right.
Yeah, thank
Thank you,
Dr. Luciana.
Dr. Yanti.
Thank you, Ibu Yanti, Ph.D. If Professor Dr. Setiono Sugiharto, the dissertation advisor, would ask any questions, please do so.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana. Pak Jimmy, I have one question related to the concept of fluidity and complexity of culture that you quoted from Pennycook's insights. Here it is said that the fluidity and complexity of culture recommends that instructional material should embrace a dynamic approach that goes beyond rigid categories. In your observation of the textbooks that you, as the data, as the sources of the data, do you think that the textbooks writers did not embrace a dynamic approach? And then, do you think also that the categories in the textbooks are rigid rather than fluid? Can you explain?
Okay, thank you, Professor Diono. The first question is about the cultural depiction in the textbooks that I know. Again, this is probably also the limitation of my study, that the books were all published by the government. So that is not, it's not excuse, but the books were portraying local culture more than target and international culture, which is fine. But then it will result in the, you know, the limitations of the understanding of culture itself, which is fluid in nature. So I would suggest that, yeah, regardless who the publisher was, but then it should be a balanced capture or a balanced proportion of these categories or these culture, because again, like I said, this is the benefit for the young generations to understand culture in a more appropriate way. That's the first. The second is the content. Is that your question, Prof? The content or the categorization?
The categorizations.
The categorization. Like I said in my critique, Byram and Morgan, somehow they tried to depict all the cultural representations, which is good. There are 9. But still, like I said, in my finding, there was one, probably more, but there was only one that I found regarding this was about technology, probably also something else. And that means that this phenomena should be addressed in a more serious approach by all the pertinent people like government, the policymakers, the textbook writers, as well as the teachers and the learners. Because otherwise, the textbook would just only, you know, like showing culture as it is that we know so far. So answering your question, the portion of culture is not really enriched by this, especially the Pennycook's concept of transcultural flows.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Okay, Pak Jimmy, thank you. Professor Sugiharto, let me ask you, as your co-advisor, 2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to answer straightly to the point. The first question, what makes your study different from the previous study? That's Prof. Bambang asked you again and again, actually. So can you please answer directly in terms of what that your study is worth investigating, because you claim that your study fills the gaps. What are the gaps and how you fill the gaps? So please answer this question briefly, Pak Jim. Actually, I'm just continuing Prof. Bambang's question because you did your best to answer the questions, but I believe you can make it better. So please.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana. If I may summarize the gaps or how did I fill in the gaps, actually there are 3 big points there. First, the previous studies, they were mainly focused on the quantitative approach compared to qualitative approach. That makes the findings and all the discussions were not as rich as the qualitative analysis that I did. The second one, they focus more on the large culture instead of small culture, which is not the case that we are having in today's world. The culture is not that static but dynamic, like what Holliday said in his theory. And the third, transcultural flows was not carried out as the studies. I couldn't find any transcultural flows analysis based on EFL textbooks or any other textbooks. I only found that transcultural theories in other area, like for example, historical culture or geographical culture, but not based on textbooks. That's my answer, ma'am.
Thank you, Pak Jimmy. Let's continue with the first question. You are engaged in qualitative analysis. What is or what are contributions of your qualitative analysis? Because you claim that method makes your study different from the others. So tell us clearly, by conducting qualitative analysis from the 3 textbooks, what are the contributions?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Luciana. Probably I will just come from my findings, my presentation and my findings, only the key findings. First of all, by doing qualitative analysis, of course, will be very much different. If you see that other studies using quantitative approach, well, the findings were like percentages, numbers, and which one is more dominant, which one is least dominant. And I think that's not the case what we are going to learn in the dynamic world today. But we need more than that. So in my qualitative analysis, for example, the text about Afghan, we never know that, for example, Afghanism is like the representation of culture with that one word. So we can learn a lot. For example, the students will, oh, I see. So if they find something like this, I believe that they will be more confident, as well as in the terms of the cultural competence. I have to mention this. They will be more competent when they talk to other people from other countries, that this term has something other than just Afghan as Afghanism. So I can explain that from the theory of Byram, for example. Oh, it has social identity, social group, social interaction, and things like that.
Okay.
And the second one is not only texts. This is the problem, not the problem. This is the issue, that not only texts represent culture. We have pictures, we have dialogues, we have cultural notes. Like I said, in the book of grade 10, there were 11 cultural notes spoken by people not from Indonesia. And that notes were like teaching us something. And we can learn that these notes are very beneficial, regardless who spoke that words. But then transcultural flows engage. And I can say that probably most of us here in this room, or probably teachers, they are not aware that this is transcultural flows. And we are affected somehow by that, on daily basis.
Okay, that's in terms of the cultural contents, right,
Okay.
Jim? That you were looking into the content materials qualitatively, and you found that your study can deepen the understanding how culture is represented in textbooks.
Right.
Now the last one, related to your gaps. If you have got qualitative analysis, and you also adopted small culture.
Right.
How small culture is significant in light of transcultural flows? For some researchers and maybe some teachers, it will be much easier to talk about culture in terms of local, national, international.
Right.
But that's exactly at that juncture you are trying to argue. Then this is the point that you have to argue for, Pak Jim. How are you going to argue that the existing understanding of culture, when it is limited to large culture, may not be able to address the very subtlety of culture in the current phenomena.
Right.
And you are adopting small culture.
Right.
So now explain clearly why should be small culture and how it is related to transcultural, because that's the very gist of your study. Go ahead,
Okay.
Pak.
I would say that why small culture and why transcultural flows, because I believe that this is actually what culture is. So if we talk about culture, we don't just say that this is Indonesian or this is American. So because this is very related to our daily lives, I believe that small culture is just like a theory which is closer to the reality that culture is very fluid, dynamic, and cannot, like Pennycook said, I had the luxury to talk to him by email. And he said, and he explained to me that just take this very simple like this. He said in his email that culture is very fluid. So it travels out of the boundaries, geographical, historical, whatever you name it. You can go there and then they can stay there, but unchanged. But small culture changes. This is the key point, that culture is changing. So wherever you go, like American Grandang, things like that, it happens everywhere. We can see it everywhere, every day, and then probably we are not aware. So that's my standpoint, that looking at culture should be redefined. And then I believe this is one of the big contributions for the learners to understand it better, for the next generation especially.
Okay, thank you, Pak Jim. The last one, the very last one. If you base your arguments on these accounts, then how do you see the limitation of Byron and Morgan in this case?
The
in
limitation.
relation to what you were saying, you argue for the fluidity and the dynamic nature of culture,
Yes.
which is in line with global Englishes.
Right.
That's the main point. But you adopted 1999 Byron and Morgan. So
94. Yeah.
94, sorry, it's even older. How do you see this concept, Byron and Morgan, in relation to your main argument? Because now maybe the examiners are wondering. You argue for something very current, using the very fluid concept of culture, but you base your data on Byron and Morgan. But from Byron and Morgan, you are able to reveal what's going on in the very textbooks that we are using.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, after all your efforts, you have to be able to tell us if you believe that culture is fluid and dynamic, but you use Byron and Morgan 1994, so what are you going to do with the theoretical framework? That's the question.
Okay.
Explain it to us.
Thank you, Dr. Luciana. Actually, I tried to find cultural categorization in line with the small culture theory or small culture concept, but I couldn't find, because most of the theories, I would say that they are portraying culture more on the large culture concept, not small culture. But this Byron and Morgan theory, I just tried to look into deeply what he said in this book, that he's actually in line with the small culture concept, with the limitations, of course. He said himself that, of course, this categorization may not depict or represent all the cultures that we have. But at least, he said, I tried to use this categorization to help people to see culture in a more, dynamic way. However, I also said in my findings that his categorization was also limited, and it is proven in my findings. So my saying would be that I used that cultural categorization because there was limited sources that I can find from the literature, trying to capture culture with a small culture concept. That's the first. And the second is, of course, I also believe that all theories are not perfect, ma'am. So this is my simple answer. So I also, Byron, even probably Pennycook himself, he said also that probably my theory will not be accepted in the next 20 years. So we have to see from both angles. And
Okay,
sorry
thank
if
you.
I'm not.
Thank you, Baji.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra, the examination is now over. This open academic session to examine our doctoral candidate is finished. Please permit us now to have a short intermission to assess the examination results of Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra.
Hadirin yang terhormat, para penguji, promotor, ko-promotor, dan ketua sidang akan meninggalkan ruangan selama 20 menit. Hadirin kami mohon berdiri. Hadirin dipersilakan untuk duduk kembali setelah prosesi selesai.
defense, the total credits earned during your study, and the duration of your doctoral study at this university, I hereby announce that you, Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra, have passed the examination satisfactorily. I now invite Professor Dr. Setiono Sugiharto, the dissertation advisor, to confer the doctor's degree on Mr. Jimmy Sapoetra and thereupon deliver his laudatory address.
With the power invested in me as your dissertation advisor, I hereby pronounce you Doctor of Linguistics, with all the rights and honors pertaining thereto according to the extant academic traditions. In evidence of your promotions, I present you with the doctor's diploma, which you have obtained with great diligence. I wish you great success in your future career.
Jim, stand here.
I now want to make a few personal observations about your work so far. Dr. Jimmy Sapoetra, with a strong commitment and painstaking efforts in completing your dissertation research, you can eventually earn the degree of Doctor in Linguistics. Dr. Luciana, my fellow promoter, and I, your promoter, have the privilege today to congratulate you with this academic achievement. Congratulations on your accomplishments as the 54th doctor graduated from the doctoral program in Applied English Linguistics at Majaya Catholic University of Indonesia. We are aware that conducting research on novel topics such as transcultural and cultural flow is not an easy endeavor, as you need to grapple with and to grasp the emerging and novel concepts related to the topics. But your patience about and interest in the topic has enabled you to persevere in completing the research. Needless to say, your research has helped throw an important light into the complexities of the representations of culture in EFL textbooks, despite the fact that you still have many revisions to do. Pak Jimmy, based on the comments and suggestions given by the examiners. In a nutshell, your research has expanded and enriched the perspectives and insights deriving from the previous studies on the similar topic. Now that you have accomplished and defended your dissertation, Dr. Luciana, your co-promoter, and I hope that the academic contributions you have made will be of significance to textbooks writers, curriculum designers, language teachers, students, and the societies at large. We also hope that you can continue the research traditions you experienced during your study in the doctoral program for the sake of enlightening and inspiring your colleagues and students, and most importantly, the communities at large. Finally, may these occasions be a moment of happiness and celebrations to your family and colleagues. Kepada seluruh anggota keluarga saudara Jimmy yang berbahagia, pada hari ini Dr. Luciana dan saya menyampaikan penghargaan kami. Semuanya telah memberikan dukungan moral, khususnya bagi penguji, Dr. Sisilia Halimi, and Professor Bambang Kaswanti and Dr. Yanti. Dan kami menghanturkan doa dalam mengantar saudara ke pencapaian gelar tertinggi di dunia akademik. Selamat berbahagia bersama seluruh keluarga pada hari ini. We would also like to share our happiness with your wife, Rosdiana Siregar, and your children, Matthew Pardomuan, Keisha, Evangeline Hasian, Karen Angeline Hasian, all of whom I believe are present today, and with the officials from BINUS Nusantara University. We believe they must be proud of your accomplishment, Dr. Jimmy. We wish you best of luck for your future contributions to the field of applied linguistics. Thank you.
Dr. Jimmy Sapoetra, let me also on behalf of the examiners offer our heartfelt congratulations with your academic achievement. I now invite you to say a few words to the assembly.
Selamat siang, izinkan saya bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Saya tidak mempersiapkan apapun, maaf. Jadi Bapak Ibu, terutama promotor saya, Profesor Doktor Setiono Sugiharto, Co-Promotor, saya panggil M.Ed, Dr. Luciana, M.Ed, penguji Profesor Doktor Bambang Kaswanto Purwo, Yanti, Ph.D, dan Ibu Sisilia Halimi, Ph.D. Terima kasih yang sangat tulus saya panjatkan buat Bapak Ibu. Dan terutama saya ingin memulai dengan ucapan syukur saya kepada Tuhan saya Yesus Kristus yang telah memberikan saya hidup kedua karena saya tidak layak berdiri di sini. Tahun 2020 saya ada di ICU 42 hari dirawat karena COVID. Dan saya tidak pernah bermimpi hari ini saya bisa berdiri di sini dan bisa akhirnya menyelesaikan studi saya. Sekali lagi mohon maaf Profesor Setiono, Ma'am Lucy, untuk ulah saya yang membuat Prof dan Ma'am keteteran ya karena saya masa studinya sangat mepet. Terima kasih dari hati yang paling dalam. Dan Tuhan sudah memimpin saya sampai sejauh ini. Saya juga ingin menyemangati teman-teman yang masih berjuang untuk studi. Pertama juga ingin saya sampaikan ucapan terima kasih yang luar biasa kepada Yayasan Bina Nusantara, untuk Pak Bernard, CEO, untuk Rektor ketiga, Prof. Har, untuk Ibu Rektor, Bu Nelly, untuk Ibu Dekan yang hadir saat ini, mohon Ibu bisa berdiri, Ibu Dekan, Ibu Elisa Karolina Marion, Dekan Fakultas Humaniora di BINUS University. Terima kasih Bu sudah datang, tadi susah nyari mobil karena hujan di mana-mana macet. Untuk juga teman-teman Fakultas Humaniora yang saya sangat hormati, beberapa hadir sini dan ketua jurusan saya, Pak Wahyu, Ph.D. Mohon berdiri Pak. Terima kasih sudah hadir. Dan teman-teman saya dari PGSD, ada Bu Noftri, ada Pak Warno, Pak Freddy. Terima kasih sudah hadir. Semangat yang dua ini yang belum lulus. Segera menyusul ya Pak Freddy dan Pak Warno. Ya. Yang dari jurusan lainnya ada Mem Wiwi, Pak Kun, ada Pak Nanang dari belakang ya, Bu Arta, terima kasih Bu Olive, Pak Wisnu dari Atmajaya, dan juga ada siapa lagi yang saya lihat, ada Pak Paulus, Mas Widi, siapa lagi belum kesebut ya? Oke, terima kasih untuk kehadirannya. Oh Bu Bernadette, ini dari Universitas Maranatha, makasih Bu Ber, jauh-jauh dari Bandung sudah hadir. Dan juga terima kasih tentu saja kepada teman-teman saya juga yang tidak bisa hadir hari ini karena mereka berada di belakang layar mendoakan saya, khususnya menit-menit sebelum saya sidang. Terima kasih juga tentunya untuk keluarga saya, ada istri saya yang tercinta, boleh berdiri. Lalu anak saya yang hadir cuma 2, Prof. Yang satu lagi ada lomba di tempat lain, ada Akesia dan Karen. Mereka mungkin 3 bulan terakhir sempat tidak terperhatikan, Prof. Karena saya sibuk terus, lalu saya terus cuti ya Pak Wahyu beberapa hari terakhir karena mengejar revisi dan harus saya selesaikan. Sekali lagi, saya sebenarnya merasa tidak layak untuk berdiri di sini, tapi karena kemurahan Tuhan dan anugerahnya sajalah saya boleh menyelesaikan. Dan ini bukan, menurut saya ini bukan akhir dari segalanya, justru awal saya untuk mulai lebih giat lagi dalam dunia akademik, lebih serius lagi dan berkontribusi untuk dunia pendidikan, khususnya di BINUS, tempat saya bekerja, dan juga untuk Atmajaya. Saya bersyukur bisa studi di sini dengan pembimbing yang luar biasa. Sekali lagi mohon tepuk tangan untuk Prof. Seti dan Mem Lucy dengan kesabaran yang sangat luar biasa membimbing saya. Saya tahu mungkin saya ini bikin deg-degan semua orang gitu ya. Mohon maaf, terutama Mem Lucy. Dan Prof. Bambang yang terus-menerus mengingatkan saya, Prof. Saya bersyukur banyak belajar dari Prof. Ya. Mem Yanti juga dan Mem Sisi. Terima kasih sekali lagi. Dan akhir kata, saya ingin menyampaikan bahwa ternyata studi S3 itu memang memusingkan. Ngambil waktu banyak, nggak tidur, saya pernah nggak tidur 20 jam karena udah ditunggu sama Mem Lucy, Prof. Seti. Usia saya tidak muda lagi. Ya mungkin saya mau kasih sedikit saran, Bapak Ibu yang mau studi S3, menurut saya jangan merit dulu, studi dulu baru merit belakangan. Karena yang punya anak saya merasakan ya banyak sekali perjuangannya ya. Saya mengalami sendiri gitu. Untuk anak-anak saya udah besar ya, kalau yang masih kecil itu kesulitan. Oke. Dan yang mungkin juga saya ingin sampaikan bahwa yang paling penting adalah ternyata memang kalau kita mau belajar, mau diajar, ya mungkin kadang-kadang tidak mengenakan ya, ditegur, diingatkan itu, tapi akhirnya itulah membawa kita semakin bertahan dan mau terus berjuang sampai titik akhir. Sekali lagi terima kasih Atmajaya, terima kasih BINUS yang memberi kesempatan saya untuk bisa kuliah. Sekali lagi Bu Elisa mewakili mungkin dari pimpinan yayasan, terima kasih Bu untuk beasiswa dari LPDP karena tentu dari rekomendasi dari institusi tempat saya bekerja. Dan hari ini mungkin tidak sempat hadir, harusnya ada perwakilan dari UKI ya, karena saya S1 di UKI, untuk juga yang memberikan rekomendasi saya untuk studi S3 ini. Dan juga S2 dari UPH mungkin tidak bisa hadir. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, terpujilah Tuhan Allah Tritunggal yang saya imani, terpuji Bapa, Anak, dan Roh Kudus. Soli Deo Gloria, amin.
Satu hal lagi Pak Jimmy,
ya, Prof.
Sebelum Ibu Lucy menjadi co-promotor Pak
iya,
Jimmy,
saya sampai lupa.
Saya didampingi oleh almarhum Pak Yasir Nasanius yang juga berkontribusi terhadap perjuangan Pak Jimmy selama ini. Terima kasih. Ya,
Prof, saya lupa menyebutkan tadi, mohon maaf Prof, saya tidak menyediakan catatan. Jadi pembimbing saya, Prof. Setiono, sebelumnya didampingi oleh co-promotor Pak Yasir Nasanius yang sudah berpulang, dan saya terima kasih juga kepada beliau karena beliau juga terus dengan semangat mengingatkan saya, memotivasi saya. Saya selalu ingat kata-kata beliau, come on you can do it Pak Jimmy, selalu begitu kalau ketemu. Terima kasih, dan saya yakin beliau juga sudah bertemu dengan Tuhan dan bersuka cita. Terima kasih.
Ladies and gentlemen, this doctoral degree ceremony has come to an end, and I therefore declare the assembly closed.
Hadirin yang kami muliakan, Dekan, para penguji, promotor, dan ko-promotor akan berfoto bersama dan memberi ucapan selamat kepada doktor baru kita, Dr. Jimmy Sapoetra, dan keluarga sebelum meninggalkan ruang sidang. Kami persilakan.
Sebelum kami berfoto, izinkan kami atas nama Fakultas Pendidikan dan Bahasa LTBI, Unika Atmajaya, mengucapkan selamat kepada perwakilan keluarga besar BINUS, Ibu Dekan dan timnya, dan juga perwakilan yayasan. Semoga dengan kehadiran dokter baru ini, BINUS semakin bisa sukses dan memberikan dampak untuk pendidikan Indonesia kita. Terima kasih.
Oke semuanya, smile. Oke baik, lihat sini semuanya. Pagi ini yang berbahagia semuanya bahagia, smile. Lagi 3, 2, 1 lagi. 3, 2, 1 lagi. 3, 2, 1. Oke yang lain. Sudah. Baik, dengan keluarga. Oke, rapat. Oke, baik semua. Oke, karena ini kabar bahagia semuanya boleh senyum. 3, 2, 1, lebih semangat lagi. 3, 2, 1 lagi. Iya. Oke, saya minta keluarga aja tetap bertahan.
Terima kasih banyak Prof. Bambang. Thank you. And Lucy, thank you.
Hadirin dimohon berdiri saat prosesi meninggalkan ruangan dan kemudian memberikan ucapan selamat kepada Dr. Jimmy Sapoetra beserta keluarga.